All right, welcome back to the program. Ajuri Ngelale is joining me right now. He's the SSA to the President on Public Affairs. Welcome, Ajuri, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Nancy. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Now, let's get started. The idea behind the presidential retreats, midterm with the ministers, 6 years has gone. You have about 18 months to go. How is the presidency assessing itself? Do you guys think you've done well?
Thank you very much. So this is really a question that demands a contextual answer. Done well in the context of moving us from where we were to where we are now. I would say yes. If you say done well in terms of achieving your ultimate long-term goals, obviously those will not be achieved in 6 years of any administration. Yes, we're pleased with the progress we've seen across sectors. We can get into the specifics of why. But at the same time, we recognize that there are major challenges still looming across sectors that still have to be dealt with. So we're not spending too much time clapping for ourselves. I think we're more focused on really addressing those challenges. But I think the ministerial retreat was quite really productive in the sense that we have now introduced a mechanism to governance in the country that we're not used to seeing, right? Where we are now appraising the officials of government who have been appointed and given mandates that are sacrosanct to the Nigerian people. For the first time, you're now having measurable benchmarks across these sectors that we can now say, based on your performance, what have you done? Where are you based on the parameters of what we had set out for you?
Are there general benchmarks for all the ministers?
Oh, absolutely not, because they're all contextual, right? So, for example, if what the ministers across the sectors had done is they had submitted plans, the kind of performance plans in the beginning of the second term, rather. When that happened, they said, based on our projections, we expect that by this year, we would have achieved this within our sector. This year, we would have achieved this within our sector. And of course, these are different sectors. So, for example, in water resources, you're looking at, for example, things like dam construction, things like irrigation, things like, some of the availability of resources to the hydroelectric dams, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these things, you can now measure them out and say, okay, based on what your mandate is and based on the resources available, what are you telling me as Mr. President that you're going to achieve? And then based on, we now get to year 2, we can now say, okay, are you on course? Have you gone 25% out of the 100%? That is 1 year out of 4 years. And then we can now measure. So that has really, really added a level of measurability to the performance of federal administrators in a way that we had never seen before. Some ministers had done much better than others. That has been a consistent trend. So, for example, and I don't want to cite too many examples, but what I would just say is that you have a ministry like the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, where we have roads and bridges coming up across the country, Sukuk bond-funded roads across the country, et cetera, et cetera. And he has consistently met up with his performance benchmarks, for example.
Okay,
other ministries, we have seen a reshuffle in the cabinet, where we had two very significant ministries.
Just this last one.
That's right, changed leadership. So I think there's clearly a template now, and based on the performance, Mr. President is taking necessary action.
Is it Mr. President that is marking the scripts of those ministers? And yes, and how is he doing it? Because it's not just about coming together and talk, because whatever the ministers would also do will dovetail from the federal budget of each year.
Of course.
And would also come, yes, as a result of what perhaps the finance minister or whatever money is available to do that. So is it just about, okay, I built so road, I did open, constructed dams. Are there some kind of new innovations that the ministers are bringing? Is there like, a long-term even development for the country? So I've asked you like 2 or 3 questions now.
No, that's fine, that's fine. I think, okay, first, you're absolutely right. And that's why I started by saying, we're not clapping for ourselves in the sense that we understand that there's a context. And the context is that when you come into 50+ years of deficits across sectors, from military and civilian administrations, you're not within 6 years of depressed oil prices and all the challenges we've had, 2 recessions, 1 global pandemic, once in a century global pandemic. You're not going to be able to solve 50 years in 6 years. But with that understood, you can make significant progress within the ambit of the resources you have. To the point you made about cash release, it's a valid point. The Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has been very clear about the fact that we've been able to cash back our budgets. It was this administration that brought us back to the January to December budget framework, which we had lacked for well over a decade. That has really allowed us to actually cash back fully our budgets. I think last year we achieved, even in the middle of a pandemic, about 90% budget performance in terms of cash release behind the budget, which is not, has not been the case with Nigeria. We've been doing about 40–50% over the last decade plus. So that has been good. What we want to do is we're saying, look, we have our budgets tailored out in such a way that the cash is being released to the ministers, so they have no reason, they have no legitimate reason for non-performance, because they're receiving the funds that they're supposed to receive from finance. So it's not the situation like before where you have a budget of 500 billion and you're only seeing 125 billion in cash to actually do work. We're actually backing a 150 billion naira budget with 150 billion naira in cash. So contractors know that there's predictability around when they can receive their funds so that they can fully mobilize their workers to site, etc. And that makes a difference when you're trying to achieve timelines on projects like roads, bridges, airports, seaports, power plants, dams, and the like. So that's on the one end. On the other end, it is not only the president, to answer your other question, it's not only the president who is marking scripts, as it were. That is why we have the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation coordinating the ministerial retreat. This is, of course, the engine room of the federal government, where you have, for example, every single document, every single memo that is coming up to the Federal Executive Council for approval goes through the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. That's why he was able to lay out to all Nigerians during the retreat exactly how many contracts have been awarded, in what sectors, and he gave the figures around what has been done, and then what level of completion on the various projects had been achieved across these sectors. But I think in addition to all of that, and we have to remember, before 2015, none of this stuff existed. This is an innovation brought by this administration in the first place.
About what? The presidential retreat?
Well, not necessarily retreats. I think they'd had retreats.
Yes, they've been retreats before.
It's not retreat now. We're talking of having a benchmarking system where there's actual, where you say, look, if I'm a minister, I have to provide a performance report to the president through the SGF. As I provide that performance report at the beginning of the term, based on the realities on ground, based on projects that I'm inheriting and projects I'm starting, you're now able to measure year on year on year how far you're going, so that we're not just saying, I have done well as a minister. They ask you why, and you can't tell them why. No. Everything is now grounded in verifiable data and fact-based investigation. And so that is the kind of innovation we have needed in Nigerian governance for a long time. We have started now, and we're going to build on it and perfect any areas that are imperfect at the moment. I think the other part, my sister, is that as we look at this, we have to also recognize that it's not a matter of just getting together and assessing ourselves. It's also a matter of how can we refine and innovate the processes of administration in such a way that we can be more efficient and more productive. What we've done is we have done in the retreat, if you notice, we brought people like Alhaji Aliko Dangote, we brought people like African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina, and many other officials, even Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Aminu Mohammed. We had many officials who are not necessarily of the federal government of Nigeria come in and say, look, what is the external international perspective of what is happening in Nigeria? What are some of those things that maybe we're not seeing that you think we should be looking at?
And what do they tell you guys? What do they tell you guys? Because these are also officials that worked at a certain time in Nigeria.
That's right.
What did they tell you guys? Because I also know that Akinwumi Adesina did also mention that the federal government's debt, he cautioned that, because our debt now is at about 35 trillion naira. Now, if we take a look at BUHARINOMICS, at least in the last 6 years, how are you all assessing yourselves? You said earlier, this is an administration in the last 2 years has suffered 2 recessions. The first time in history, and a pandemic. The first time in history, at least in modern times, that I know. First pandemic in over 100 years, so to speak. But the first recession was not impacted by a pandemic. So perhaps it may be things around the management of policies around the government.
No, the first recession was inherited in 2014. There was recession that we walked into. You recall, it
the first recession was in 2016.
No, my sister. You remember there was an oil price crash in 2014, ending of 2014. Remember now, we couldn't even fund the budget then. We weren't paying government salaries. We couldn't fund the budget or anything. That was 2014. That was the first recession we had. When we came into office, there was a recession. Then in 2016, remember, that's why we say 2 recessions. 2016, you now had the second one.
Ajuri, if my brain can serve me right, I know that the first recession we went into was in 2016, immediately after this government came into place in 2015. And we got out of it.
We had a recession in 2016. We agree on that.
Yes,
what I'm saying is that when we had the oil price crash of 2014.
But we were not in recession. We were not in a recession. The economy was growing, but it was not growing as much as it should grow. It was growing at about like 2% or so, which was lower. Right? Yes, which was lower than the growth rate. But when this administration came into being in 2015, we got into a recession in 2016. Remember that when the president came in, about 9 months or 6 months later, there were no ministers and all of that. But I don't want to go into that. Where I'm really going into, Ajuri, is we've passed that. Okay. Your administration has about 18 months' time. 2 recessions and a pandemic, that's the record. Yes, 2 recessions and a pandemic. That's correct. Inflation at high rates. Yes. FX rates over high. I can name all the statistics. Debt ratio high. Though they will say, okay, fine, we have a revenue problem and all of that. Where I'm really going to is the BUHARINOMICS in the last 6 years. And you have 18 months to go. What is the president saying to himself, or perhaps even to people? Because in the last, of course, we know we suffered a lockdown last year. We've also come out. We've come out with a 5% growth, but due to base rate, because so everybody came out of a lockdown. So you can see that resurgence in economic activity. So I can agree to that. But what is the president saying, or what is he really doing about some of these economic statistics that are not looking good? Well, first and foremost, let's understand something. Because when we talk debt, when Dr. Adesina talked about the debt, he was not in any way saying that Nigeria is on some sort of, in the midst of some sort of debt crisis. That was not the context of his comments. What he was saying is that if it is a kind of a medium to long-term strategy to accumulate debt, to build infrastructure, that it is not going to be sustainable, right? And that has never been the position of government anyway. What he was just doing is warning, saying, look, this is not a sustainable course if this is what we want to do. But the president, fortunately, has been very, very clear with Nigerians and saying that is not the course we're even attempting to take. What we're doing right now is we're investing in infrastructure that will unlock investment in the economy. So, for example, now, we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement coming into implementation now. About 250 million jobs expected and about over $3 trillion expected to come into the continent. We're competing with Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, Senegal, Ghana, and all of these other countries that have, many of them have already long made these investments that for 50 years we wasted time doing nothing about, right? So the president is saying, look, we actually don't have the luxury of time. This is not about politics now or saying, oh, because I want everybody to know I performed as president. That is not the president's mindset. His mindset is about how do we ensure that we are positioned to effectively compete with our contemporaries for the new jobs, millions of jobs, and investments that are coming to the continent. That is why in the immediate term, when we have our excess crude account that was about $50 billion in 2011. By the time we got into office, 2015, the excess crude account had been spent down from $50 billion to $2 billion. We have not had more than $2 billion in that account since then with the depressed oil prices. The point here is not to point fingers at previous government. No, it's to state the fact that when you have that kind of buffer that has been wasted, nothing to show for it, no social investment, no real infrastructure, nothing. What you now have to do is you have to find a way to fund that infrastructural investment so that you can unlock the investments in the country that you're looking for, bringing in foreign factories and industries and all of that. They're looking at your roads, your airports, your seaports, your power plants, your dams. So with what you're saying now, so can deduce that the president or the presidency or this administration is going borrowing because of that? No, so the point here is very simple, very straightforward. Is that we cannot pretend. There's no magic wand. You don't wake up in the morning and infrastructure appears. You have to fund it, and you have to fund it somehow. What we are saying is that getting low interest debt financing for these infrastructure projects, which are investments that will repay, because for example, the roads and bridges we're constructing, we're not just constructing them so Nigerians will clap for us. We're constructing them so that we will now put toll, so that Nigerians, instead of spending 8 hours on a road that should be taking 1 hour, right, they will be more than ready, instead of paying thousands of naira to fix their car on a spoiled road, they'll be more than ready to pay 150 naira at the toll, e-tolling, not cash tolling like Obasanjo's era, e-tolling, and they'll be able to now pass through that road, have a 1 hour journey instead of 8, and they're not going to have to fix their car at the end. So what we're saying is that that is how you get your money back. The investments we made in rail, Lagos-Ibadan rail line under this administration, start and complete. The Warri-Itakpe rail line, abandoned since 1987, we have completed it. This is how you're going to generate revenue in the country, where in the next 18 months we will finish the Kaduna to Kano
segment of the Lagos to Kano rail line, which we would have started and completed. I'm talking of the Kaduna to Kano segment. So this is how you move cargoes on the high-speed rail line that is going to now allow you to generate the revenue to pay back the debt. What we are not doing is we're not doing what was happening before, where you will now be borrowing money to pay salaries or to pay for overhead. That is the difference between what we're doing now and what had been going on before. Now, the last thing on this issue of debt, my sister, and I think Nigerians have been thoroughly deceived on this issue, and they should not take my word for it. They should go and verify what I'm saying on the Debt Management Office website, dmo.gov.ng. When we came into office, first of all, in 2010, the national debt, that is foreign and domestic combined, total debt was $35 billion US, $35 billion US, 2010. In 2014, it ballooned to $67 billion, almost double, right? No infrastructure to show for it, no social investment. At the time when we had the highest oil revenues in the history of our country, we were still accumulating huge debt with nothing to show. Now watch this. From that time, $67 billion in 2014, till now, we're sitting right now at about almost $90 billion. That means that we've added about $25 billion, depressed revenues, and our people are seeing railways, airports, seaports, roads, bridges, Second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Abuja-Kano Express. I mean, the projects are all over the place. So what we are saying is that there's a huge gap between first of all, we've taken less debt than the previous administration, even though what they like to do is they like to quote it in Naira to deceive Nigerians. So they'll now say, okay, we had a national debt of 12 trillion Naira in 2015 because it's based on an exchange rate of 160 Naira to $1. Well, guess what? The exchange rate now, it had already started falling off the table when we came into office at about 223, when Baba took office. Now we're sitting at about 410 Naira to the dollar. So when we borrow in foreign exchange, we're borrowing these loans in dollars. They are now quoting it in Naira at 410 to the dollar, making it appear as if the debt has tripled under President Buhari, when in fact we have taken out less debt in dollars that we actually take it out in than even the previous administration. And people don't even recognize these things. They don't understand them. That's why we're working very hard for people to go and look at the DMO website, go and see which year we accumulated which debt, and go and ask the question, what did you do with the debt that you accumulated? And we will now have that conversation.
I'll come back to the issue of debt in a bit, but I also want us to take a look at the big elephant in the room that came out from this presidential retreat. That the vice president did say that FX rates should be moved to be more reflective. What exactly did the vice president mean? Because immediately after he made that pronouncement, the media went agog with, okay, the vice president is calling for a devaluation of the Naira. And I tried as much as possible to read in between the lines of what the vice president was saying. And it's about, if you're saying that the rate should be a bit more reflective of what the market is saying, that means the Naira at 410 Naira to the US dollar should not be at that point. So what does the VP mean? Well,
His Excellency, the Vice President's position is essentially that what we have right now is a situation where we have scarcity of dollars. His Excellency, the Vice President, even in the first time when he was chairing the economic management team, was very, very clear that in engaging with multilaterals like the IMF, etc., we are not going to sacrifice the strength of the Naira to appease any multilaterals conditions for accessing new capital. And he has firmly rejected that. He's a maximalist when it comes to defending the maximum strength of the Naira. Now, with all of that said, we recognize that right now we're in a situation where we have a scarcity of foreign exchange in the country. Essentially, the monetary authorities have taken the position that we're going to ration the supply of foreign exchange and basically manage demand as opposed to opening up supply. The Vice President's position is that we must now open up supply instead of just managing the little bit of foreign exchange in the country. So the idea is that, look, while the policies of our administration have actively, worked to strengthen the Naira and take the emphasis off of foreign exchange. What do I mean in specifics? Import substitution, right? Before now, we were the largest importer of rice in Africa in 2015. We're now the largest producer of rice in Africa today. We've saved about $3 billion annually on import of rice alone, not to speak of wheat, sugar, fish, and many of these other products. The process of doing that was the policy of import substitution, substituting these imports and the foreign exchange spent on these imports with local production, stimulating the Naira in the process. So That is the policy we've taken. But as you do that, we still recognize there's need for foreign exchange, right? When we have investors that want to come in, a major part of what discourages them is if they feel that they're going to try and bring in their dollars, and when they want to now, take it out of the country when they're done with their business, they're having problems. Look at the airlines today and several others. So what the Vice President's position is, they're saying, look, let us allow the Naira to reflect the market reality. That doesn't mean it's going to become 500 Naira to the dollar overnight. Absolutely not. But if we're at 410 now, and we all recognize that it's artificially low and it's not recognized, even if you do Amazon.com payment today, they're going to be charging you about 430 out of your Naira account, right, to reflect the actual rate. So what we're saying is that if we take it marginally to a 420 or 430 or something like that, and it allows for a massive inflow of dollars, we're now going to be at a point where we would have stimulated the kind of investment to strengthen the Naira and de-emphasize the dollar.
The issue is that how do you take it that way? Or how do you take it to that level? The NAFEX rate is 410 right now. Right. How do you take it to that? Because if you also take it to that, you're artificially floating it. And this is not even the first time this kind of thing is happening. In terms of
artificially floating,
yeah,
let me go ahead.
Yeah, what I mean is that from what you've just said now, if the Naira can move from 410,
this is hypothetical,
yes, if the Naira can move from 410 to about 420,
let's just say somewhere in that range, 420 to 425.
Yes. What I'm trying to tell you is that we've seen this kind of processes, at least in the past, not just about your administration. There was a time the Naira was a bit stable, 150 Naira to $1. If you had $10,000 in your hand, that was just 1.5 million.
Well, that was when we had, of course, the historic oil highs. We were receiving $120 per barrel oil. We had 8% growth, almost solely on the basis of oil and gas.
Yes, but are you also...
That's not where we are today.
Are you also, or is the presidency also thinking that for the Naira to have its real value, or for the Naira to be strong, doesn't the presidency think that it should be supported by fundamentals also?
No, but that's the whole essence of what I'm talking about. Is right, my sister, see, this is the problem we've had in the country, is that for too long, we have basically hidden the systemic frailties of our economy under high oil prices, right? So when we had high oil prices and people were seeing 8% growth and all these things based on bloated oil prices, right, and oil revenues, what you now had as a situation was we were paying out billions of dollars that we were earning from this free oil money coming in. We were using it to import food, import everything we could import. We imported it, even the things that we can easily produce here. There was no effort in that direction, or very little effort in that direction. So what we're saying is that right now, the gap, the difference between what was going on before and what is going on now is that not only have we been substituting these imports with local production, which is why we've been able to manage. People have not even asked the question, why is it that in 2014, when oil price crashed, right, we could not pay salaries to federal civil servants. We certainly could not even provide cash to back our budget. Why am I raising that? When we had oil price crash during the pandemic, it went down to $12 per barrel. It has not been that low in how many decades? When it went down to $12 per barrel, guess what? We were still paying salaries every month, and we were still backing our budget with cash. Now the question is, how did we do that?
I was coming to that.
The reason why, the major reason why was the reason. No, not just borrowing. They borrowed too, but they still couldn't do it. So there's a reason why they couldn't do it, even though they were borrowing even more than what we borrowed. So what I'm saying is that it's not about the borrowing. It's about the fact that we've been able to all that easy money that we were just throwing away on imports of things that we could have produced locally, we're now producing them. That's why you had the Anchor Borrowers Program and all these interventions of this administration to actively substitute those imports with local production. So when you're not paying $3 billion a year on rice importation, right, and you multiply that across all the other value chains, not just in agri, but in other sectors, you'll now know the kind of savings that we've been able to now use and apply to things like infrastructure upgrades, etc., even as, yes, you're right, that we complement that with borrowing. But the reason why we have sustainable revenues now is because we've been able to substitute those imports with local production.
What does the president, because I know we have to go now because I have another interview, but what does the presidency also think about fuel importation that is gulping so much dollars? From my research, I found out that about $36.3 billion have been used to import fuel into this country in the last 5 years. $80 million of fuel imports in a day. That's a huge one, because if you take a look at $36.3 billion, how much do we have in our FX reserves. I think, as I yesterday, about $38 billion. So you can see
absolutely
see the quantum of what is happening.
Absolutely, which is why we're working so assiduously on the international agreement we have with the reconstruction, rehabilitation of Port Harcourt refinery as step one to now get to Kaduna and Warri. And we know that the Dangote refinery is coming on stream next year, which is going to take huge pressure off of foreign exchange demand. That's going to make
But you'll be paying Dangote also too in dollars.
No,
in dollars, because it's in a free trade. It's in a free trade zone. Except you have an agreement.
It's not as simple as that.
Dangote.
We're going to be co-owners. Nigerians are going to be co-owners. 20%. We're taking 20%
20%, but that's not huge.
It's not huge in tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but you still have about 80% left. What I am trying to say is that it seems that this administration is hinging on Dangote to save us.
No, that's not correct. That's not correct. We have been investing in modular refineries. We're reconstructing our own refineries. In addition to that, and we're not doing it the way that it was done, where previous administrations giving to their friends briefcases and all of that. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we went to our Frexim Bank, and we got our Frexim Bank to approve a co-financing agreement based on the capability of the contractor we brought from Italy. So it's a world-class contractor who has done this work in several different continents, and that is why we're able to get the financing from our Frexim Bank to allow us to get Port Harcourt refinery fully revamped. I think it's a bit unfortunate that time ran out on us because this Nigeria startup bill.
Yes, I was coming to that. That's what I want to end with.
You know,
just speak to me about it. What's that really?
For us, we recognize that our people are the future of the Nigerian economy, not oil and gas. And really what we have to do now is to effectively, and we've been working on this for the last 5 years, is, you know, under the social investment programs, we had the innovation hubs and all of the geopolitical zones where young people involved in fintech, robotics, machine learning, etc., can go and apply their skills and start their MSMEs. We want to take that to a next level now. With the Nigeria Startup Bill, the expectation is that we'll be able to create a one-stop regulatory kind of shop where startups across the country, particularly targeting our young people. You cited the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund earlier, 75 billion. These are interest-free loans to young fintech entrepreneurs and others to the tunes of tens of millions of naira each. This is not small money because we believe that they are the engine room of future Nigerian development. We've already seen companies like Andela with billion-dollar valuations, multi-million-dollar funding rounds. We want to provide essentially a national council potentially of digital empowerment and entrepreneurship that will allow for the kinds of regulations and the kinds of funding for our MSMEs, our innovation-driven MSMEs in the country to be able to thrive. And that's what we believe the Nigeria Startup Bill will be able to achieve for us moving forward.
Okay, let's see how that goes. We'll continue to monitor that. I'm afraid there's not much you can take, Ajuri, because I have another interview to take.
I wish we had more time.
Yes, perhaps you'll come back again.
I look forward to that.
You'll come back again. Let's take a look at this, because you guys have 18 months to remain in that villa. Well, after 18 months.
For us, it's not even an issue of remaining in villa, my sister. The heat is much. There's a lot of work to do. And we're just focused on doing it.
So when next you come, we'll take a look at the kind of work you guys have
done.
And be able
Thank
to
you
take
very
a look
much.
at that. All right. I've been speaking with Ajuri Ngelale, who is the SSA to the President on Public Affairs. Let's quickly take a break. And when we come back, Onyeka Chichuku will be joining me. He's the Senior Program Officer at PPDC. We'll be looking at if the FOI, Freedom of Information, has really improved service delivery amongst the Nigerian institutions. We'll be doing that when we come back. To stay.
The outbreak of COVID-19 changed the world and unsettled our economy. As we adapt to this unprecedented reality and start the journey towards recovery, the African Economic Congress invites you to a televised and virtual event that will bring together innovative leaders from all sectors of the African economy. It will be a platform where sustainable solutions that enhance the African economy will be discussed. Themed, Accelerate Africa, Building Back Better. Date, November 1 to 3rd, 2021. For sponsorship or further inquiries, contact us at events@aecongress.org or call us at +234 906 691 2600 or +234 907 370 3649. To attend, register at www.aecongress.org. Powered by Deloitte and Next Year SPD. Join us as we take the first step towards strengthening the African economy to create the Africa we want.